This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.
Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson. It's my pleasure to have with us once again Dr. Buck Melton, one of our great local intellectuals. I can say that.
Thank you. You can say it. I don't know if that makes it so.
Well, that's good. And unsuccessful write-in presidential candidate, but we'll move past that, and we won't
it's the age of Trump. We just can't look back.
We won't belabor that. Well, one of the things that out there is we have the whole world is different. We've got these huge revolutions occurring. There's a lot of tension in the world. And one of the things that goes on is the nature of trust for our institutions. So the question is, an American citizen is walking down the street, can he trust what's happening? Are things trustworthy? And one of the issues that can be brought up about this is cyber warfare, cyber manipulation, the fact that overseas foreign intelligence agencies could be interfering with electoral process. That might be happening, and the CIA has an opinion about that. But then the argument is, well, we can't trust the CIA. So who can you actually trust in this disturbing age? And is there some kind of knowledge or hope the American people can take in that their electoral process is protected, cyber warfare is not going to impinge them, and comments about that?
Well, it's a modern world. We live in a post-matrix society of we could tell you, but then we'd have to kill you. Actually, I think trust in government and trust in institutions, if it existed as late as the 1960s, went out the window with the Tet Offensive and with Vietnam. And it just seems to be getting worse and worse and worse. And there were some shreds of trust, this idea that there were some entities in the American government that were apolitical and that were above politics and were the untouchables. And that too has been eroded with President Richard Nixon's use of the FBI and the IRS for political purposes, questions about the IRS and its work with or work against conservative nonprofits. The latest one, I think, is Director Comey's involvement at 2 or 3 different particular points in the election of 2016, sometimes to the detriment of Donald Trump, sometimes to the detriment of Hillary Clinton. The Clinton camp is now saying that the reason that Hillary lost the 2016 election is because of James Comey's letter a week before the election, that there was something new. And now the CIA, after the fact, saying, we can tell you that we think that Russia deliberately hacked the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, and the Republican National Committee, but only leaked the DNC stuff in order to help get Trump elected president, but we can't tell you why we think that. So
it's really, I mean, if you're an American citizen and we're out here in the beautiful town of Macon, Georgia, we're a long way from the centers of power and influence. I think we could say that. I mean, worldwide in any event. We're a long way from Moscow. We're a long way from Washington. And these events seem to unfold like play actors. We see these things happening. The first question, I mean, there are a lot of questions to ask, but what about foreign influence on our elections? It's not an unusual story to have all the countries in the world interested in what happens in our electoral process. And additionally, there are lots and lots of dual citizens out there that can go back and forth. So is it shocking that there would be some kind of influence, some other countries would try and influence either indirectly or directly our electoral process, or has that not happened? It would appear to me that it has happened, but do you have comments on that?
Well, to answer that, I'm going to quote, of all people, don't hate me, G. Gordon Liddy, in a slightly different context. Back in the early to mid 1980s, Liddy was here on the Mercer campus and gave an address. It was highly controversial at the time that Mercer would give Liddy money to speak. But I must say, like him or hate him, he was a very charismatic speaker, and he made a statement that has stuck with me all these years. He said, every 4 years in the United States, you have a contest to see who is going to be arguably the most powerful human being in human history. And if you think people are going to play fair in that contest, then you're dreaming. Now, that's certainly realpolitik, but when you put it like that, it really makes you stop and think. I mean, he certainly convinced me. And I think he was addressing the Democratic and the Republican Party and their shenanigans, but I don't see any reason why that analysis would stop at the border. If the United States has this degree of military clout, this degree of economic clout, this degree of clout in the international community, of course foreign states that may be affected by that are at least going to have the inclination to involve themselves, legitimately or not.
And yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what we actually know about all that, but we could say that the lobbying firms in Washington routinely receive substantial amounts of money from overseas governments.
Yes.
All these political arrangements are taking place in our global community. Economic things are happening. And it would be reasonable that an interested country would try and at least they'd want their person to go in, or they'd like the right outcome. And we have a rather lurid, unusual example that occurred in this last electoral process,
Yes.
which is somewhat of, I guess, the dawn of a new era.
Yes.
Which is the emails that were supposedly hacked by someone, somewhere, and these were made public. And some questions to ask would be, was this necessarily bad, I mean, to get the information out there? Or is it, do the American people have a right to the information? And was this enough to influence the election? And is there a puppeteer in Moscow pulling strings here?
Yes. Well, there are a lot of questions there. Certainly there is some information that should not be made public, and I've used this example before, that if Barack Obama is holding a press conference and somebody from the press pool on live network television says, Mr. President, do we have the Kremlin, do we have intelligence aspects on the ground in the Kremlin? The last thing that Obama should do is say, why, yes, we actually do have some good CIA sources in the Kremlin, and here are their names. Obviously, when you put it like that, there are things that the American people do not need to know. Now, the question is, what are these things? Where is the line? Daniel Ellsberg, Eric Snowden, are these people traitors or are they heroes? I tend to think that unless something is an immediate threat to American national security, clear and present danger, you might hear the phrase put, then the information needs to be out there. And to the degree that someone like Snowden is getting the information out there, that is a good thing. Now, having him flee to Russia is not a good thing.
Yes.
Now, how about the DNC and the RNC? These are not government agencies. Presumably, they are not in possession of classified, clear and present danger style material. On the other hand, it's an understood aspect of international relations that a foreign state doesn't involve itself in the internal politics of another state. Now, that's a convention, and I suppose it's only breaking the law if you get caught. But the CIA is claiming that Russia's been caught. So now what do we do with that information?
Well, just thinking about this, I remember the election, this was the 2012 election. Romney was recorded, secretly recorded, and this was made public saying, 47% or whatever the story was. This was a secret, so presumably this was protected interchange.
Yes.
This was made public. And it had a substantial impact, and you could say, well, maybe the American people had the right to know that. It's a similar kind of thing, although the Democratic political operatives did it.
Yes.
It seems to me that's going back and forth trying to, in this political quasi-warfare, all these new venues of conflict are occurring, and it would appear also that the U.S., if the Russians did this here, would the CIA or our I guess people that are puppeteers, are they trying to do something, name it, in Turkey? Are they trying to do something to influence their policy, maybe by, I don't know, some disinformation about Putin's girlfriends or something, or they're trying to like bribe a general to act in a certain way or get some information. And it's just a cacophony of different kinds of maneuvers that all the nations in the world are exercising against one another to protect their interests.
Yes, it's like the old comic strip in Mad Magazine of spy versus spy. It's going on all the time, going on in all different directions. I'm not saying that that morally I condone it, but I recognize that it is the case. If we look at the recent demise of Fidel Castro and dredge up all that the CIA was doing to overthrow his regime and to assassinate him, and it was like the gang that couldn't shoot straight.
Yes.
So it goes on all the time. Other high-profile examples during World War I, the Zimmerman telegram, which was leaked to us by England, and that was a blatant attempt by the British Empire to get us involved in the war, for instance.
Yes.
So World War II, Churchill pitching his radio addresses in such a way as to appeal to the United States. It's how the game is played. The internet has brought an interesting new dimension to it, because this can now be done at a great remove. It can be done remotely. If it's done really successfully, it's even possible that you won't know that it's been done. So, and this of course is one of the big questions about Hillary Clinton's email server, that she kept maintaining that there was no breach. Well, do we really know that?
Yes.
So,
well, we have this complicated world. I guess the point that we might say, or we might try and establish now, is, okay, this is the world we live in. It's always been that way. The ability to disrupt, influence is greater than ever. Probably we're doing it. Probably many other countries are doing that in different ways, stronger or weaker ways. That the political parties are doing this against one another. The conflicts are out there. It's a worldwide thing. And sort of accepting that idea, which brings us to if that type of cyber soft warfare turns into hard warfare, there could be a real issue, could there not? And it's been said that the next Pearl Harbor might not be the planes swarming in to attack the fleet, but suddenly all the electricity goes off, all the power grid is knocked off, the GPS system is knocked off, and suddenly the country is just devastated with, it's a disaster. The hydroelectric plants don't work, and the nuclear power facilities depend on the appropriate program, and suddenly all the nuclear power facilities blow up.
Yes.
And so there's sort of a nightmarish possibilities exist in regards to cyber assaults. And are the American people informed about this? Do they know enough about it? Is this something that's neglected in the public dialogue?
Yes. Well, we need to be aware of it. I'm not sure how much you can do with it. And as a matter of fact, it doesn't even need to be that sophisticated an attack. Instead of actually hacking the nuclear power plant, you could simply start firing massive DNS requests to servers all over America. This would be the equivalent of having a computer dial your cell phone number over and over and over again, and every time you hang up on it, it dials you again instantly. So no regular calls could get through to you. That's the way you could hit every single server in the country. So they just couldn't transact business or communicate. The problem with the internet is that it was designed by a civil libertarian society and a technocratic society with the idea of free exchange of information and open exchange of information in mind. And so that can be abused. It was not designed to be secure. That was not obviously we can make it secure today to a degree, but that was not the original impetus. The idea was openness and exchange of information. And that openness of exchange of information can be exploited by an enemy.
Yes,
so
yes.
What do we do about it? We turn it off, but by turning it off, then how do the nuclear power plants connect?
So understanding sort of the world we live in might be an important thing. the American people have to grapple with. So we have cyber assaults are possible. This could be a big deal.
Yes.
We need to get some particular attention to it. And then one of the things that's come out in this, I guess, the political cycle is the CIA has asserted, well, okay, this is what happened, but we can't talk about it, as you mentioned earlier. And if you can't talk about it and you assert this, is it possible for Americans to trust their institutions? So what really is going on, and if in this age of cyber danger, our abilities to trust the glue that preserves our country, the matrices that makes our country work, to trust that cohesive arrangement, that becomes impossible. It really is very assaultive, is it not?
Yes, and I think that the CIA has an uphill battle for a couple of reasons. First of all, it is by its nature secretive, and when it says trust us, we can't tell you why, that doesn't, once again, that does not wash well in the wake of Vietnam. And secondly, when you see the FBI, which had this, I would think had a very high reputation of trustworthiness and being apolitical, has been shot to blazes by Comey's involvement. So it's, why should we trust the CIA if we see the FBI behaving this way? It leads us into a couple of very basic and very disturbing philosophical questions. What is the truth, and how do you know it? If you have all these actors pushing what is now, in the wake of the election of 2016, fake news, how do you know if the news is fake or not? What is the nature of reality? How do you know it? We find ourselves asking, like Pilate, what is truth? Can we trust anything? I would say that normally the counterbalance to an institution or a government agency we cannot inherently trust would be populism. But if you have groups among the people out there who are pushing their own agendas, and many of them are conspiracy theorists, and they get fake news inserted and it starts looking real, how do you trust any news? It's terrifying.
So one of the situations we have now is in some ways that in fact Time magazine called it the divided states of America.
Yes.
Rather clever turn of phrase there. But actually the geographical arrangements have sorted themselves out, so there are Republican places and there are Democratic places, and their viewpoints are very, very different. And if one particular group is in power, the other group just won't believe or support anything they do, and the frictions are going to rise enormously,
Yes.
are they not? And the situation that's taking place now with the Trump regime going in, and the people that have been selected for cabinet positions, the Democratic arrangements are these people are just going to do something very bad. We wouldn't trust anything they did.
It's
or
a military junta.
Anything they say is going to be wrong. Their policies would be wrong. There's, if they said one thing, it might not be correct. And the idea would be just as soon as the Republicans get in and Trump gets in, the flow of news is going to be absolutely tarnished. The CIA is going to produce whatever kind of papers it wants to produce, and the FBI, the formerly untouchable people, will be corrupted, and the courts will be, similarly things will happen. The Supreme Court will flip to viewpoints that are very contrary to the principles of the Democratic Party. We have this terrible absence of dialogue. How can you have a dialogue with different constituencies if the constituencies don't trust the information the other side is presenting? It's a difficult
situation. The well has been poisoned, yeah. Well, it's the line between what is acceptable politics and what isn't. And you mentioned both of us have, but just in that last sentence or two, you mentioned several agencies or institutions that are supposed that their image is to be above politics, that
Yes.
they take their cues from things other than political expediency or policy positions of the parties.
Yes.
You mentioned the FBI,
Yes.
you mentioned the CIA, you mentioned the Supreme Court, and yet all of these things have clearly become political to some degree or another. The Supreme Court, it's not about law anymore, it's about politics. I'm not what's called a court watcher. But I can usually predict with a very high degree of accuracy how each justice is going to rule in any important case. And I would suggest that's not a good thing, because it means that the judge is being driven by an ideology and not by a detached approach to the law. Now, a lot of people would have trouble with that, but the untouchable FBI. So if everything is politics, then we trust nothing, and then the more dialogue.
Well, so
it's the matrix.
Who can you trust? Well, and another example would be the police department. So the idea is the police are doing all these bad things, particularly minority communities. They're very corrupt. They're evil. And you should just not believe anything they say or do. When people are arrested, it's the charges are trumped up. The criminal justice system is a corrupt system that's basically putting people of color in prison arbitrarily, capriciously.
Yes.
And it makes it very, very difficult to have a united society,
Yes.
doesn't it?
It's really sort of, if you put it in terms of the social contract, it's the flip side of a point that you've made a lot. And if you want to make it again, the idea of the breaking down of the importance of national boundaries and globalization,
Yes,
if you'd like
yes,
to repeat
yes.
that again. But it's, if the nation state is no longer important because the community is global,
Yes.
then this big breakdown of trust hits it from the other side. That the whole reason that we have a social contract and give the state power is to help us secure our rights. But if it's not going to be doing that, if it's inherently untrustworthy and is apparently or certainly working against our interests, then that is the recipe for anarchy. That you retreat into your echo chamber, which reinforces your view.
Yes.
You find online communities in which you
Yes.
have a solidarity, but you start to say that this is not a legitimate agency. This is not a legitimate government. Why should I obey the policeman when I believe that his orders are unlawful or he's abusing his authority? Why should I do that?
Yes, yes.
So,
And the social contract, I mean, one of the issues we have the idea is we want a diverse country. But if you look at the diverse, if you take the root back, it's divided.
yes.
So the idea is when you say we want a diverse country, what you're really saying is you want a divided country.
Yes.
We don't want a homogeneous country. We
Yes.
want a lot of people that have all sorts of different viewpoints, and then it becomes a daunting task to get them to get along, particularly belief systems that are very powerful. You have Sharia law, you have all kinds of things, and a large immigrant population in the country. I think over 10% are foreign-born. And putting all this in the American stew, the stew pot, trying to make it work, is a tough thing. And so should we take our hats off to politicians that try and do that? Try and bring some kind of a sense of homogeneity or a common viewpoint out of all this chaos is difficult, isn't it?
Yes. Well, as you know, I've been a strong critic on this program over the years of the catchphrase that you find. It is the ultimate catchphrase in higher education and has been for 10 or 20 years, diversity. That I absolutely condemn diversity. It's not diversity that makes us stronger. It is finding something that unites us despite that ethnic or political or ideological diversity that makes us stronger. If you say we should take our hats off to the person who is trying to bring us together, the problem with that, let me put on my tinfoil hat here, is that how do you know that he's sincere if he tells you that's what he wants to do? Maybe he's simply trying to push his agenda and using that as a tactic to do so. That's the point at which I'm afraid we're getting now, that the well has been poisoned so thoroughly that can you even trust anybody who says he wants to do that anymore? That's terrifying.
Yeah, so, dare we trust our leaders? Well, one of the things that goes on is that we've talked about populism. The leaders just arise with no particular, often, I guess you could say, training. They just pop up.
Can you name somebody?
Well, I think President Trump.
Oh, yes, excuse me.
Well, all right. So there are people that just sort of appear on the scene. in different constituencies. And you could say, we could talk about the French, the way they do things with their education system, their bureaucrats. They have people that really sort of run things there. And they go through a very powerful educational system.
Yes.
They're selected for all kinds of qualities. And actually, the French repose great confidence in these bureaucrats, as they do in their philosophers, if I can say that. So one of the things that makes a society work is, in my opinion, is a sense of trust.
Yes.
Wherever you are, it's going to make things so much better. You won't require, the dispute numbers will go down. You'll be able to say, well, I want to put a factory here, but I'm worried about pollution, so I probably won't do it. And you could say, well, the person was just thinking about everybody. We trust the person that's going to make that story.
Yes.
And so that would seemingly be a successful society. Maybe the Scandinavian societies,
Yes.
the people that looked into this, they look into trust relationships, and the contrary thing with that would be corruption, how corrupt the society is. So the trust goes away when the perception is that the people are being lied to, and their leaders are just basically feathering their own pockets. They're doing this, they're doing that. And we could say with President-elect Trump, I mean, that's not such a good thing to also have, so obviously your financial arrangements not separated from your public power, or at least the perception that might be the case is there.
Yes. Well, I think the point you're driving at here is that we want the people in ultimate power, according to this model, the French model you mentioned, is to have such a degree of disinterest that playing politics couldn't bring them any pecuniary advantage, and so they wouldn't do it. And for instance, the civil service and the courts are supposed to be that way. The civil service is supposed to be that way. With regard to the National Civil Service, we have the Pendleton Act, and we have the Hatch Act. One involves making sure they're not, getting them in is not a political process, and the Hatch Act makes sure they don't play politics once they are in. But is that viable as well? You can say that the civil service is so huge that there is an inertia to it despite whoever the political masters are at the time, and maybe there is some truth to that, but over time perhaps not. With the courts, it hasn't worked. That we have seen, and we talked in a recent episode of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who is supposed to be this senior, disinterested figure. She's well off. She is a senior citizen at this point, and sort of moving beyond the games of the young here. And she had no problem with jumping in with both feet in the election of 2016, and that's just the most blatant example. So how do we get this disinterested ruling clique? Is Trump an example of this? Can we hope for this from him? I don't know. I just don't know.
Well, we always our country sort of blunders along. It's still a pretty successful place. We have to wonder what this century is going to bring, and you could imagine a lot of stormy weather.
Yes, I can. I remember what Winston Churchill once said. He said, "I don't think people are going to have a lot of fun in the future." And the more I look at the direction we're going, I think that he had it figured out.
Well, we have to hope that the good sense of the American people is going to be there, and that there are many people in the country are going to watch things with the best interest of the country at heart, and they're going to step forward if things get too far off the rails.
The silent majority, I think that the ultimate hope is in populism, and we can only hope that it will do a good and responsible job.
Okay, well, thank you, Bucky.
Thank
we'll
you,
have
sir.
another conversation.
Indeed.
Thank you for being here. Thank you.
This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.